Chapter 1. The Noodle Incident. The transmigration felt less like a cosmic event and more like a system crash. One moment, Shin Yuan was debugging a stubborn line of code in his humid Beijing apartment. The next, he was slumped over a cold metal desk, his cheek adhered to a keyboard by drool. He jerked upright, disoriented. The air smelled of ozone, cheap coffee, and military-grade cleaner. Banks of flickering holoscreens illuminated a darkened room. Lines of glowing data scrolling past. This was not his messy desk. This was the server room of the Northern Frontier Command's tech division, as described in the trashy web novel Star General's Cyberheart he'd skimmed before bed. Before the panic could fully set in, a translucent, semi-opaque panel flickered into existence at the periphery of his right eye. Welcome, User 007. You are now live streaming. The code writes forbidden logs. Viewer count, 1,243. Live chat enabled. Shin Yuan blinked. The panel remained. A stream of text scrolled rapidly up its side. Rainbow Frog 92. OMG, he's awake. New MC just dropped. BL_connoisseur. Transmigrated into a programmer? Unique. But where's the ML? I was promised a general. Dog blood lover. Settings look cold and techy. Needs more drama. Too tense. System_message. User 007. Your primary objective is to generate engaging content. Viewer engagement dictates reward level. Please satisfy audience demands. Shin Yuan pinched the bridge of his nose. A live chat from the real world. He was not just a transmigrator. He was a damn reality TV star for BL enthusiasts. A profound, soul-deep weariness settled over him. He had hated the novel's plot, hated its cliches, and now he was trapped inside it with a peanut gallery. His new memories slotted into place. Shin Yuan, junior programmer, inconspicuous, overworked. Perfect. He could be inconspicuous. He could ignore the chat. He would fix servers, draw his pay, and avoid all plot lines, especially those involving the male lead, General Xieling, the icy, brilliant, lethally handsome war hero who, according to the novel, fell for a flamboyant prince. His stomach growled. It was apparently 0200 hours. According to routine, the mess hall would be empty. He navigated the sterile corridors, the chat a constant, buzzing sidebar to his vision. Aesthetic guy. The MC has a good vibe. Looks tired and done with everything. Relatable. Plot hound. He's ignoring us. Rude. System, give him a quest. Make him trip into someone's arms. Shin Yuan rolled his eyes so hard he saw his own brain. He pushed into the mess hall, blissfully silent. He retrieved a vacuum-sealed pack of instant noodles, added hot water from the dispenser, and sat alone at a long table, the steam warming his face. For a few beautiful moments, there was only the simple, savory scent of artificial beef broth. Peace. The double doors hissed open. A man walked in, and the very atmosphere of the room changed. It grew colder, sharper. He was tall, draped in the severe black uniform of the High Command, his shoulders broad enough to block a starship's exhaust. His hair was jet black, his features carved from marble and frost, a stark, intimidating beauty. General Xieling. The chat exploded. Rainbow Frog, 92. Hey, it's him. The General. The ML. BL_connoisseur. Body alert. 10 out of 10. Look at that jawline. Look at the way he fills that uniform. Dog blood lover. Opportunity. MC, get up. Accidentally spill your noodles on him. System_message. Urgent audience request. Initiate physical contact with target. Xieling. Reward. 10 world points. Xieling moved with a predator's silence towards the coffee machine. He was mere meters away. The chat became a single, screaming, pulsating entity. Kiss him. Touch his hand. Make eye contact. Dog blood drama now. Shin Yuan looked at the frenzied text, then at the dangerously handsome general who was the epicenter of every terrible plotline in this universe. He saw a vortex of forced romance, political intrigue, and near-death experiences. He looked down at his noodles. They were simple. They were warm. They demanded nothing. With deliberate, soulful slowness. Shen Yuan lifted a generous cluster of noodles to his mouth and slurped. The sound was obscenely loud in the quiet hall. He ignored the general. He ignored the chat. He focused on the noodles, on the mundane act of sustenance. This, he thought, is my rebellion. From the corner of his eye, he saw Xie Ling pause, a black ceramic cup in hand. The general's head turned, just slightly. His gaze, like twin glaciers scanning a barren plain, passed over Shen Yuan. It didn't linger, but it didn't dismiss him either. It noted the programmer sitting alone at 0200, glaring with profound irritation at an empty patch of air beside him, as if it had personally offended him, before returning with serene devotion to his meal. Xie Ling's brow furrowed, a minute crack in the ice. He finished pouring his coffee and left as silently as he came. The chat raged. Da blood lover, did he just choose noodles over the ML? BL_connoisseur. Iconic. Actually iconic. The sheer audacity. Rainbow Frog 92. The general looked confused. He noticed. That's a win, right? System_message. Primary objective failed. Viewer engagement rising paradoxically. Calculating new parameters. Shen Yuan finished his soup, drained the broth, and placed the bowl neatly in the cleaner. He felt a small, grim sense of victory. He had navigated his first encounter with the plot and had chosen, definitively, the noodles. He returned to the server room, the chat's commentary now a mix of outrage and fascinated intrigue. He didn't care. He had a system to debug, and a life to avoid living. Chapter 2. The Seer is assigned. The crisis struck at 0600 hours during the peak pre-drill system check. One of the three primary tactical holoservers, the one managing real-time terrain mapping, emitted a dying shriek of feedback and went dark. The giant wall display in the command prep room fizzled into static. Panic, cold and efficient, rippled through the officers present. Shen Yuan, running on 2 hours of sleep and a deep-seated aversion to incompetence, was already elbow-deep in its access panel before the junior lieutenant had finished stuttering his report. The novel's tech was advanced, but its underlying logic was often laughably simplistic. This wasn't a hardware failure. It was a cascading logic loop in the terrain renderer, a bug he'd seen in a dozen early 21st century video games. The chat, having followed him dutifully, provided unhelpful commentary. Aesthetic guy. He looks hot when he's focused. Glasses are a vibe. Da blood lover. Boring. Where's the general? I need tension. Maybe the server explodes, and they have to share an oxygen mask. Rainbow Frog 92. Shush. He's doing something. Look at his hands fly. Shen Yuan blocked them out. He rerouted the processing load, wrote a slapdash patch to bypass the corrupted subroutine, and initiated a reboot. The entire process took 4 minutes and 37 seconds. The holoserver hummed back to life. The wall display blossomed with a crisp, three-dimensional map of the northern valleys. A stunned silence filled the room, followed by a wave of relieved murmurs. The silence was broken by the crisp, authoritative sound of boots on polished floor. General Xie Ling entered the command prep room, his presence sucking the oxygen from the space. His eyes went immediately to the restored screen, then to the slight, rumpled programmer extracting himself from a tangle of cables, a smudge of grease on his cheek. Who resolved this? Xie Ling's voice was low, devoid of inflection, yet it carried to every corner. As Specialist Shen Yuan, sir, the lieutenant stammered. Xie Ling's gaze landed on Shen Yuan. It was a full-body experience, that gaze. It felt less like being looked at and more like being scanned by a very sophisticated, very dangerous piece of hardware. Specialist Shun, Xie Ling said. Report. This was it. The moment to be invisible. Give a technical, boring report, be dismissed. Shen Yuan straightened up. A recursive loop in the LOD generator, sir. Bypassed the faulty node and forced a clean render cycle. Server integrity is uncompromised. He kept his eyes fixed on a point just over Xie Ling's left shoulder, where the chat was having a meltdown. BL_connoisseur. Eye contact. He's avoiding eye contact. It's tense. Dog blood lover. Server integrity is uncompromised. I'm going to compromise something. This is dry as dust. Rainbow Frog 92. The general is staring. He's so intrigued. And he was. Xiaoling wasn't looking at the screen anymore. He was studying Shen Yuan. His eyes tracked the subtle, almost imperceptible twitch at the corner of Shen Yuan's mouth. The way his eyes kept flicking to that empty space by shoulder and then rolling slightly heavenward, as if pleading for patience from a particularly stupid deity. To Xiaoling, the explanation was too clean, too fast. No one saw the critical failure that quickly without insight. And this man's behavior was aberrant. He showed no fear, no pride, only a profound, bone-deep exasperation aimed at nothing. At spirits, perhaps? Was he hearing voices from the machines? Seeing ghosts in the code? A recursive loop, Xiaoling repeated, his tone neutral. He took a step closer. The chat screeched. Shen Yuan fought the urge to step back. And you saw this where? In the code. I saw it in 1,000 bad game forums, Shen Yuan thought. In the error log pattern, sir, he said instead. Xiaoling took another step. Now Shen Yuan could see the frost-pale gray of his irises, the faint scar bisecting his left eyebrow. The chat overlay began suggesting increasingly improbable and physically demanding forms of fan service. System_message, audience prompt, swipe the grease from the MC's cheek. Reward, 15 world points. BL_connoisseur. He's in his space. The proximity. I can't breathe. You looked away from the screen several times during your diagnosis, Xiaoling stated, his voice dropping to a near rumble meant only for Shen Yuan. You were consulting something else. Shen Yuan's blood ran cold. He thinks I'm a spy. He thinks I have a hidden concentration aid, sir. Internal visualization. The lie felt weak. Xiaoling's head tilted, just a fraction. A predator listening to a curious sound. He saw the conflict on Shen Yuan's face. Not guilt, but the strained expression of a man desperately trying not to react to something only he could see. The spirits were communicating with him, even now, giving him answers, making him uncomfortable. A fascinating hypothesis crystallized in Xiaoling's strategic mind. This man was not a conventional asset. He was an oracle, a seer whose prophecies were embedded in technobabble and exasperated sighs. Effective immediately, Xiaoling announced, his voice rising to fill the room again. Specialist Shen Yuan is reassigned. He will serve as my personal technical advisor. He is to be present for all strategic and logistical briefings. His insights are to be considered pertinent. The room buzzed with subdued shock. Shen Yuan felt the world drop out from under him. Personal advisor? To the male lead? This was the absolute worst-case scenario. The chat, however, erupted in triumphant, feverish joy. Dogblood lover, yes. Forced proximity trope. Activated. Rainbow Frog 92. He wants him close. He's fascinated. System_message. Primary plot, engagement, successful. Reward, 50 world points. Original novel snippet unlocked. Prince Li Zhao's arrival is scheduled in 14 days. Shen Yuan stared, numb, as Xiaoling gave him one last, inscrutable look, a look that now seemed to hold a spark of possessive curiosity, before turning to leave. The general had just conscripted him into the heart of the dog blood drama, believing him to be a prophet. And all Shen Yuan had wanted was to fix servers and eat noodles in peace. Chapter 3. Forced Prophecies. Shen Yuan's new office was a small, intimidatingly clean desk positioned just to the right and slightly behind General Xiaoling's command chair in the main strategy room. It was a position of bizarre visibility, a pet oracle on display. The first briefing was a special kind of hell. High-ranking officers stood around a massive holodeble, displaying the jagged, frost-bitten topography of the northern frontier. Xiaoling, a statue of lethal grace, pointed to a narrow mountain pass codenamed Viper's Gulch. Conventional scans show clear. Our drones report minimal energy signatures. Xiaoling's voice was clipped. Then, without turning his head, he spoke again, lower. Specialist Shen, your assessment. All eyes swiveled to Shen Yuan. The chat, of course, was no help. Aesthetic guy, the power dynamic. Him in the big chair, you at the little desk. Fan self, dog blood lover. Say something vague and mysterious. I see a shadow in the ice. Shen Yuan desperately scanned the holo display. The data was clear, but the original novel's plot whispered in the back of his mind. This was where a hidden enemy ambush would occur, using insulated caves to mask their signatures. It wasn't prophecy, it was spoilers. He cleared his throat. The thermal inertia readings for the eastern rock face are inconsistent with the surrounding area, he muttered, trying to sound technical and uncertain. Suggest a secondary scan for anomalous subsurface insulation. Could be a data ghost, or a shielded cavity. He braced for dismissal, for laughter. Xiaoling didn't move for a full 5 seconds. Then he turned his head, just enough to pin Shen Yuan with that glacial gaze. A shielded cavity. He said it not as a question, but as a revelation. He turned back to the table. Lieutenant, deploy the deep resonance seismic probes. Focus on the eastern face of Viper's Gulch. The order was carried out instantly. An hour later, the results came in, a network of natural caves, recently outfitted with signal-dampening liners. Perfect for an ambush. The atmosphere in the room changed. The glances thrown Shen Yuan's way were no longer skeptical, but wary, awestruck. He hadn't guessed, he had seen. Xiaoling leaned back in his chair, the faintest hint of something akin to satisfaction on his face. Your sources are accurate, Specialist Shun. The chat lost its collective mind. Rainbow Frog 92. He calls the chat sources. I'm a source. BL_connoisseur. He's building a whole narrative. The reclusive genius who speaks to the digital spirits. Dog blood lover. This is better than dog blood. This is intellectual seduction. It became a torturous routine. Xiaoling would ask for insights on supply routes, comm encryption, personnel rotations. Shen Yuan, trapped, would cobble together answers from his modern knowledge, half-remembered plot points, and sheer logical deduction, always delivered with the pained expression of a man listening to a chorus of invisible idiots. The new encryption keys, the spirits find them aesthetically displeasing. Too symmetrical, prone to pattern lock, he'd say, while the chat screamed about Xiaoling's collar being unbuttoned. System_message. Audience demand. Sigh heavily when he asks a question. It reads as long-suffering wife. Shen Yuan sighed. He couldn't help it. Xiaoling's eyes would sharpen. The spirits are troubled? Elaborate. The worst was the proximity. Xiaoling took personal advisor lethally seriously. He would beckon Shen Yuan close to examine a data stream, his shoulder brushing Shen Yuan's arm. He would lean in to hear Shen Yuan's muttered prophecies, his breath stirring the hair by Shen Yuan's ear, his low baritone a vibration Shen Yuan felt in his bones. BL_connoisseur, ear whispering, tier SSS content, dog blood lover. He's doing it on purpose. He's creating fan service and doesn't even know it. And that was the maddening truth. Xiaoling was utterly, devastatingly sincere. He genuinely believed Shen Yuan was a fragile, tormented seer channeling chaotic wisdom from the ether. Every lean-in was an attempt to catch the whisper of spirits. Every intense stare was an analysis of a divine message. He was, with complete martial seriousness, courting intelligence reports. Shen Yuan was caught in a feedback loop of his own making. His attempts to appear mundane were interpreted as mystical detachment. His irritated glances at the chat were seen as communion with the unseen. And every time he offered a prophecy that saved resources or prevented disaster, Xiaoling's fascination deepened, binding them tighter together. One evening, after a particularly long session where Shen Yuan had prophesied a coolant leak in the south generator, he noticed a fluctuating pressure graph. Xiaoling dismissed the others, but gestured for Shen Yuan to remain. The room was quiet, lit only by the glow of dormant screens. Xiaoling approached him, not with military briskness, but with a slow, contemplative pace. The burden is heavy, Xiaoling stated, watching Shen Yuan's face closely, to see what others cannot. It isolates you. Shen Yuan, exhausted, simply nodded, his eyes darting to where the chat was spamming heart emojis. Xieling misinterpreted the glance as a seer's pain. A strange, almost soft light entered his eyes. You need not be alone in it, Shen Yuan. The use of his given name was a shock, intimate and terrifying. The spirits may speak to you, but you can speak to me. He placed a hand, heavy and warm, on Shen Yuan's shoulder. It was meant as a gesture of solidarity, of commander and valued asset. To the chat, it was a romantic declaration. To Shen Yuan, it was the closing of a trap. The general was offering protection, understanding, and relentless, intimate attention, all based on a glorious misunderstanding. And Shen Yuan had no idea how to escape it without revealing a truth far more insane than being a seer. That he was an actor on a stage, and their every interaction was being scored by an audience howling for a kiss. Chapter 4. The Panic Button. The pressure became a constant, screaming tinnitus. The chat's demands grew more specific, more outrageous. The system's rewards for compliance dangled like poison candy. More snippets of the original plot, hints of future disasters, even small cheats like temporary code override permissions. But the price was performing like a trained monkey for the invisible viewers. The final straw was a system alert that flashed with urgent red letters. System_message. Critical audience engagement dip detected. Without a significant fan service event within 24 hours, the live stream may be terminated. Termination may result in existential uncoupling. User 007. Existential uncoupling. It sounded suspiciously like being deleted, erased from this world, and possibly all worlds. Cold sweat beaded on Shen Yuan's neck. He couldn't die over low viewer ratings. He'd take the dog blood drama over non-existence. He needed a plan. Something simple, effective, and over quickly. The chat wanted physical contact. Xieling was due for his nightly perimeter check, a solitary walk along the interior concourse that overlooked the main hangar. It was poorly lit, relatively private. The perfect stage for an accident. Shen Yuan's heart hammered against his ribs as he lurked behind a structural support beam. The chat was a frenzied, encouraging scroll. Daw blood lover, yes. Ambush trope. I take back everything I said, MC. Rainbow Frog 92. Be clumsy. Be adorably clumsy. BL_connoisseur. Aim for the chest. Optimal rebound potential. He heard the measured, rhythmic tap of boots on the metal grating. Xieling appeared, a silhouette against the distant glow of the hangar lights, his profile sharp and pensive. Shen Yuan took a deep, shuddering breath. It's just a physics problem, he told himself. Calculate velocity, angle, mass. He timed his stumble poorly. As he lurched out from behind the beam, his foot caught on a slightly raised weld seam. The graceful, cinematic fall he'd imagined became a genuine, ungainly sprawl. He yelped, not as a seductive sound, but in genuine panic, arms pinwheeling. He didn't fall into Xieling's arms. He crashed against Xieling's chest with the solid, unromantic thud of a sack of potatoes. For a terrifying second, there was only the hard plane of muscle and uniform under his cheek, the scent of ozone and cold, clean sweat, and the absolute stillness of the man he'd just assaulted. Then, reflexes faster than thought, Xieling's arms came up. One hooked firmly around Shen Yuan's back, the other caught his elbow, steadying him. The hold wasn't gentle. It was the secure, immobilizing grip of a soldier preventing a casualty. Shen Yuan? Xieling's voice was close, rumbling directly into Shen Yuan's ear. It was laced with surprise and something else, concern. The chat exploded in a supernova of gratification. Yeah. System. Fan service achieved. Tier gold. He's holding him. Look at the hand spread on his back. Shen Yuan, face burning with mortification, tried to push away. "Yes, sir. My apologies. The grating, I tripped." Xieling didn't release him immediately. His hold loosened from a rescue grip to something lingering. His head tilted down, his gaze searching Shen Yuan's flushed, horrified face in the dim light. The initial surprise had melted into that familiar, intense curiosity. "You are unharmed?" Xie Ling asked, his voice still oddly soft. "Fine. I'm fine. Completely fine," Shen Yuan babbled, finally extracting himself, putting a full step of shame-filled distance between them. But Xie Ling was piecing it together. Shen Yuan had been hiding, waiting. He had thrown himself, quite literally, into his path. This was not the action of a clumsy technician. This was deliberate. A message. The spirits had commanded a physical sign, a warning too urgent for words? Or was the seer himself, overwhelmed by his visions, seeking stability? Contact with the solid, real world? Him? The theory solidified in Xie Ling's mind, elegant and compelling. The seer was drawn to him, not just as a conduit for prophecies, but as an anchor. "The path is uneven here," Xie Ling said finally, his tone returning to its usual command, but with an undercurrent Shen Yuan couldn't decipher. "You will walk with me for the remainder of my check, to ensure no further incidents." It wasn't a request. It was a decree. The forced proximity had backfired spectacularly. As they walked in stiff silence, the chat cooed and celebrated, blissfully unaware of Shen Yuan's internal screaming. System_message. Critical audience engagement restored. Reward: 100 world points. Major plot unlock. Prince Li Zhao arrives tomorrow at 0900 hours. Primary objective: secure the general's favor. The reward fell hollow. He had gotten his fan service. He had averted deletion. And in doing so, he had only tightened the bewildering, sincere knot of Xie Ling's fascination. The general now looked at him not just as an oracle, but as a man who had, for reasons known only to his spirits, needed to be caught. Back in his tiny quarters, Shen Yuan slumped against the door. He could still feel the imprint of Xie Ling's arm around him, the solid wall of his chest. It hadn't felt like a romantic trope. It had felt like being captured by a force of nature. And the worst part was the dawning, horrifying realization that flickered at the edge of his panic. For a split second, in the midst of the terror and the chat's noise, he had felt safe. He buried his face in his hands. This was so much worse than he had ever imagined. Ned. Chapter 5. The Rival's Entrance. Prince Li Zhao's arrival was not a discreet event. It was a spectacle. A gleaming, pearl-white diplomatic shuttle emblazoned with the phoenix crest of the Southern Kingdom descended into the main hangar with a theatrical lack of military practicality. The ramp extended, and the prince emerged as if onto a stage. He was beautiful in the way a lacquered dagger is beautiful, all gleaming surface and lethal elegance. His hair fell in artful, ink-black waves. His robes were silk and gossamer over fine armor, and his smile was a weapon honed in courtly halls. He was, Shen Yuan knew from the novel's pages, the designated love interest, charismatic, cunning, and possessive. And his eyes, after a perfunctory scan of the honor guard, went immediately to General Xie Ling. A spark of keen interest lit within them. The formal greetings were a study in contrast. Xie Ling, a monolith of stern courtesy in his severe black. Li Zhao, a peacock of flowing grace. Shen Yuan, standing at his assigned place half a step behind Xie Ling, tried to make himself part of the hangar's architecture. The chat, however, was having a field day. Dog blood lover. Rival enters the arena. Dog blood levels. Critical. Rainbow Frog 92. Oh, he's pretty. A different kind of pretty from the general. This is a tough choice. BL_connoisseur. Ship wars commence. Team General versus Team Prince. Place your bets. System_message. Audience split detected. Engagement doubled. General Xie. Li Zhao's voice was like honey warmed over a low flame. The stories of your fortress do not do it justice. Such stark potency. His gaze flickered over Xie Ling's form, appreciative and assessing. Your Highness is too kind, Xie Ling replied, his tone giving away nothing. Your quarters are prepared. We will debrief at 1100. I look forward to it, Li Zhao purred. Then his eyes slid past Xie Ling and landed on Shen Yuan. The prince's charming smile didn't waver, but his gaze sharpened, turning analytical and cold. A mere programmer, standing too close to the general. An anomaly. And who is this? Xie Ling half-turned, a subtle movement that positioned himself slightly between the prince and Shun Yuan. My technical advisor, Specialist Shun Yuan. His insights are valuable. The phrase, my technical advisor, hung in the air, heavy with unspoken weight. Li Zhao's eyebrow arched, a delicate, dangerous motion. A technician? How novel. The dismissal in his tone was clear. The threat beneath it clearer. In the following days, the triangle solidified with agonizing tension. Li Zhao attached himself to Xie Ling's side during briefings, offering polished strategic suggestions that mirrored the novel's plot. He was charming, informed, and relentlessly present, and he targeted Shun Yuan with the precision of a laser sight. It was never overt. A coincidental bump in a corridor that sent Shun Yuan's datapad clattering to the floor. A subtle rearrangement of the seating chart that placed Shun Yuan at the far end of the table, away from Xie Ling. A comment during a tech review. Such primitive code structures. I'm surprised the general tolerates it. My own programmers could streamline this in a heartbeat. Each incident made Shun Yuan's nerves fray further. The chat, divided and rabid, amplified everything. Team_Prince. The prince is playing 4D chess. He's removing the obstacle. Go Prince. Team_General. The general keeps looking for the MC when he's not at his usual spot. He notices. Dog blood lover. I need a confrontation. A slap fight. Poison in the wine. The climax came during a diplomatic dinner. Li Zhao, holding a crystal glass of amasec, stumbled as he passed Shun Yuan's seat. A splash of scarlet liquid arced through the air, destined for Shun Yuan's lap. Shun Yuan saw it coming. He flinched back, but not fast enough. However, a black-clad arm shot out, intercepting the prince's wrist with a grip that looked casual but froze Li Zhao completely. The liquid sloshed back into its glass, not a drop spilled. The room fell silent. Xie Ling had moved with impossible speed. He now held the prince's wrist, his expression as calm and impassive as ever, but his eyes held a glacial warning that could have flash-fried the room. Your Highness should take care, Xie Ling said, his voice deceptively mild. The gravity here is unpredictable. He released the wrist slowly. Li Zhao's smile was fixed, his eyes glittering with fury and shock. My apologies, General, and to your advisor. The word was a venomous dart aimed at Shun Yuan. Xie Ling didn't acknowledge the apology to Shun Yuan. Instead, he turned his head, his gaze finding Shun Yuan's wide, startled eyes. Specialist Shun, he announced, his voice carrying in the quiet hall. From now on, you will take your meals at the command officer's table. Your safety and your focus are paramount to our operations. It was a public declaration, acclaiming, not romantic, but possessive in the extreme. This asset is under my personal protection. Touch him, and you touch me. The Da blood drama had reached its peak. The rival was publicly checked. BML had defended his love interest. Except Xie Ling's mind was on prophecies and spirits. He had seen Shun Yuan's nervous glances at the prince all week, had interpreted them as seers' warnings of danger. The prince's accident was clearly a malevolent spirit's influence, or perhaps the prince himself was a source of corrupt energy, disturbing his seer. His intervention was tactical, protecting a vital intelligence asset. Shun Yuan sat frozen, the heat of a dozen stares upon him. He saw the prince's smoldering hatred. He saw the officer's newfound, wary respect. And he saw Xie Ling, who had just plunged him into the very center of a political and romantic firestorm, looking at him with an expression of grim satisfaction, as if he had just successfully defended a crucial piece of artillery. The chat was an ecstatic, bipartisan heaven. Team_General, victory. The general stakes his claim. Team_Prince, the angst, the rivalry. This is gold. System_Message, peak engagement achieved. Rewards unlocked for all factions. Shun Yuan felt no victory. He felt only the walls closing in, the plot tightening around him like a vice. He was no longer just an unwilling oracle. He was now the prize in a duel between a dragon and a peacock, and neither of them understood the rules of the game they were playing. Chapter 6. The Confrontation. The pressure cooker finally exploded 2 days later. It was a small thing, a final straw made of bureaucratic carbon fiber. Shen Yuan had spent the morning being systematically locked out of the main logistics database. Prince Li Zhao's superior programmers had integrated a new security protocol that just happened to reject Shen Yuan's biometrics. Then, a whispered comment from a passing aide, clearly fed by the prince's camp. Maybe the general's pet sees ghosts in the machines because he can't handle real code. Something in Shen Yuan snapped. The constant performance for the chat, the terror of deletion, the gnawing guilt over deceiving Xie Ling, the petty, venomous attacks from the prince. It all coalesced into a white-hot ball of rage. He didn't request an audience. He didn't knock. He stormed past the startled guard at the entrance to Xie Ling's private strategy office, a sanctum few ever entered. The general was standing before a floor-to-ceiling star chart, his hands clasped behind his back. "General," Shen Yuan's voice was rough, shaking with pent-up fury. Xie Ling turned, his expression one of mild surprise that quickly shifted to analytical concern. "Shen Yuan, the spirits are agitated." "There are no spirits." Shen Yuan burst out, the words ripping from his throat. He took a step forward, his hands clenched at his sides. "There's no prophecy, no voices from the machines. I'm not a seer. I see stupid, impossible, annoying comments floating in the air that won't go away." He was breathing heavily, the confession hanging between them, raw and insane. He expected disbelief, dismissal, arrest for insanity or treason. Xie Ling did not move. He didn't call the guards. His intense gaze swept over Shen Yuan's face, taking in the tear of frustration at the corner of his eye, the tremble in his hands, the absolute, genuine anguish. The chat, for once, was silent, a hushed, anticipatory scroll. Rainbow Frog 92. "Oh God, he's breaking." BL_connoisseur. This is the moment. The truth or the lie. Slowly, Xie Ling crossed the room. He didn't stop until he was directly in front of Shen Yuan, close enough that Shen Yuan had to tilt his head up to meet his eyes. The proximity was overwhelming, but not threatening. It was consuming. Then, Xie Ling raised his hands. He didn't shake Shen Yuan. He didn't grab him. He cupped Shen Yuan's face, his palms warm and rough against Shen Yuan's cheeks, his thumbs brushing away the traitorous moisture there. The gesture was shockingly gentle, at odds with everything the man represented. "Shen Yuan," Xie Ling said, his voice a low, resonant hum that vibrated through the points of contact. "Look at me." Shen Yuan couldn't look away. The general's eyes were deep, serious pools of gray, holding him captive. "The burden of true sight has broken stronger oracles than you," Xie Ling continued, his tone utterly convinced, unbearably tender. "To see the threads of fate, the whispers of data and destiny, it is a solitary, maddening gift. I understand your denial. It is a refuge." His thumbs stroked gentle arcs. "You do not have to bear it alone. You can speak the madness to me. I will listen. I will be your anchor in the storm of your visions." Shen Yuan's breath hitched. The general had taken his desperate, truthful rant and woven it seamlessly into his existing fantasy. The confession hadn't shattered the illusion. It had reinforced it. Xie Ling saw a seer on the brink of a breakdown, rejecting his gift, and was offering not judgment, but shelter. A shelter built entirely on a beautiful, unshakable delusion. The sincerity in Xie Ling's eyes was a physical weight. It was more terrifying than any suspicion or anger. This fearsome, brilliant man was looking at him with a protectiveness that felt genuine, profound, and utterly misplaced. He was offering his unwavering belief as a shield. And in that moment, Shen Yuan's resolve, built on a foundation of irritation and self-preservation, crumbled. Not because of the chat's demands, not because of the system's threats, but because of this, the devastating, heartfelt kindness based on a complete misunderstanding. A sob, half hysterical, half relieved, escaped him. He was so tired of fighting the plot, the chat, the prince, and now, this man's relentless, caring conviction. He didn't pull away from the hands cradling his face. He leaned into the touch, just slightly, his eyes squeezing shut. It was a surrender, not to the fiction of being a seer, but to the reality of Xie Ling's presence. It was solid. It was real. And in this insane world, it was the only thing that felt unequivocally, dangerously safe. Xie Ling misinterpreted the lean as exhaustion, as acceptance. A soft sigh escaped him. He shifted his hands, one moving to the back of Shen Yuan's head, guiding it gently to rest against his shoulder. Shen Yuan stood there, stiff for a moment, then went boneless, his forehead pressed against the stiff fabric of Xie Ling's uniform, the wool rough against his skin. He didn't hug back, but he didn't resist. The general held him, a steady, unmoving rock in the quiet office. "Rest, Shen Yuan," he murmured into his hair. "The visions can wait. I am here." The chat finally broke its silence, not with screams, but with a flood of soft, awed comments. BL_connoisseur. This is it. This is the real thing. Aesthetic guy. He built him a sanctuary out of lie. That's terrifyingly romantic. Dog blood lover. I came for dog blood, but I'm staying for whatever this beautiful, messed up thing is. Shen Yuan stood there, wrapped in a lie and the arms of the most dangerous man in the sector. And for the first time since transmigrating, he let go. The war wasn't over, but in this quiet, fabricated sanctuary, he allowed himself a moment of ceasefire. Chapter 7. The chat goes dark. The attack came not from the front lines, but from the invisible seams of reality itself. It began as a low-frequency whine in the base's primary comms, a headache-inducing pulse that made the lights flicker. Then, the enemy's digital assault hit, a vicious, multi-pronged virus designed not just to cripple systems, but to corrupt them from the inside out. Alarms blared. Holoscreens in the command center fizzed into chaotic, nonsensical patterns. The external shields wavered. The live chat in Shen Yuan's vision, usually a constant stream of noise, began to stutter. System, under, ADA, sign out, low. Rainbow Frog 92, what's happening? The feed is glitching. BL_connoisseur. Is this a plot event? It feels different. Dog blood lover. The general is shouting orders. MC, do something. Shen Yuan was already at his console, fingers flying, trying to trace the attack vector. It was sophisticated, alien, a logic bomb from the antagonistic Star Nation in the novel. But his own connection to the system, to the chat, was woven into the base's digital fabric. The enemy's scrambling signal was like a psychic lance aimed at the metaphysical infrastructure of his existence. Xie Ling was a whirlwind of controlled fury beside him. Report. It's a cascade corruption in the core firewall. Shen Yuan yelled over the din, his eyes darting between the gibberish on his screen and the flickering chat. They're using our own data traffic protocols as a carrier. I need to isolate the... Warning, extra-dimensional link integrity failing. The chat window dissolved into frantic, broken pixels. Can't see. Yuan. Good. Then with a silent, internal pop, it vanished. The silence was absolute. Not the silence of a quiet room, but the profound, deafening silence of a severed nerve. For months, the chat had been a constant, irritating hum at the edge of his consciousness, a layer of static between him and the world. Now it was gone. The sudden void was terrifying. He was alone, truly, utterly alone in his own head for the first time since he'd arrived. He froze, his hands hovering over the keyboard. The panic was immediate, visceral. He had relied on the chat's noise, its distractions, its occasional plot spoilers, even its demands. It had been his tether to the idea that this was all a story. Without it, the reality of the screaming alarms, the terrified officers, the very real possibility of death by orbital strike, crashed down on him with suffocating weight. Shen Yuan. Xie Ling's sharp voice cut through his paralysis. The general's hand gripped his shoulder, firm and grounding. The Eastern Shield generator is failing. The backup command line is not responding. You said the spirits warned of redundancy failures. How we fix it? Shun Yuan looked into Xie Ling's eyes, which held not a trace of doubt in his seer, only the urgent need for a solution. There were no spirits. There was no chat. There was only him, Shun Yuan, a programmer from another world, and a man who believed in him. The fear didn't leave, but it condensed, hardened into a sharp point of focus. He had to do this, not for viewer points, not to avoid deletion, but because this fortress, these people, Xie Ling, were real. He shoved the void where the chat had been out of his mind. The backup isn't receiving the kill code for the primary generator's corrupted core, he said, his voice surprisingly steady. He was thinking now, not reciting. It thinks the primary is still functional. We need to manually simulate a core breach signal on the local network for that sector. Physically, I need to get to the relay junction in sublevel 4. Xie Ling didn't hesitate. I'm coming with you. You can't. The command center can function without me for 5 minutes. You cannot function without protection, Xie Ling stated, already moving towards the blast door, drawing his sidearm. Move. They ran through chaos-lit corridors. The world had narrowed to the pounding of boots, the shudder of the fortress under secondary explosions, and the task at hand. There was no audience commenting on their synchronized movement, no one swooning over the protective stance Xie Ling took as they rounded corners. There was just the mission. In the cramped, buzzing relay junction, Shun Yuan pried open an access panel. His fingers, slick with sweat, worked on pure muscle memory and logic. Xie Ling stood guard at the door, a silent, watchful shadow. No demands for prophecies. No misinterpreted glances. Just presence. I need to crosswire these 2 feeds and send a surge, Shun Yuan muttered, more to himself than anyone. Do it, Xie Ling said, simple faith in 2 words. Shun Yuan touched the wires together. A spark jumped. In the distance, through the layers of rock and metal, they heard a deep thrum as the eastern shield stabilized, its glow steadying on the command center monitors they could no longer see. For a moment, they just stood in the humming semi-darkness, breathing heavily. The immediate crisis was averted. Shun Yuan slumped against the wall, the adrenaline receding. The silence in his head was still there, a vast, echoing hollow. But it was no longer filled with just terror. It was filled with the sound of his own breath, the buzz of the relays, the steady, calm breathing of the man beside him. He looked at Xie Ling, who was watching him not as a seer, but as a man who had just pulled off a miracle through sheer skill. There was respect there, and something else, something that had been growing slowly, untainted by the chat's narrative. You did it, Xie Ling said, holstering his weapon. His voice was quiet, without the spirits. You did it yourself. Shun Yuan met his gaze. In the absence of the chat's filter, he saw Xie Ling clearly. The lines of stress on his face, the unwavering focus, the latent strength. Not a male lead, but a leader. A person. Yeah, Shun Yuan whispered, his voice rough. I guess I did. The battle outside continued, but in that small, quiet room, a different kind of connection was forged. Not between a seer and his protector, but between 2 men who had just trusted each other with their lives. The chat was gone. The performance was over. All that was left was the raw, uncommented truth of the world and the man standing in it with him. Chapter 8. Choosing this world. The silence lasted for 3 days. 3 days of a hollow, quiet mind where Shun Yuan could hear his own thoughts without a live studio audience. He helped coordinate the digital cleanup, his work sharp, efficient, and entirely his own. The system offered no rewards. The chat gave no suggestions. It was liberating, and it was lonely. Xie Ling was different too. The questions about spirits and sources stopped. He consulted Shun Yuan on pure technical merit. But the attention didn't waver. If anything, it intensified. It was no longer the fascination of a collector with a rare artifact, but the focused regard of one professional for another, laced with something deeper, more personal. He would bring Shun Yuan coffee after a long shift. Their shoulders would brush in the command center, a touch that felt deliberate, not incidental. On the evening of the 3rd day, with the base mostly secured, A translucent blue box finally flickered before Shen Yuan's eyes, but it wasn't the chat. System Admin Interface. User 007 Shen Yuan. Status: Extra-dimensional link stabilized. Option available: Permanent return protocol. Description: Sever all ties to this narrative construct. Return to your point of origin, Beijing, Earth, 2023. Memory of this experience will be retained. Activation window, 24 hours. Yes/no. Shen Yuan stared at the prompt. Home. His dusty apartment, his boring job, his safe, predictable, empty life. The life he desperately wanted to return to when he first arrived. It was right there, a tap away. As if summoned by the turmoil of his choice, the door to his quarters hissed open. General Xia Ling stood there, still in his duty uniform, a bandage visible on his temple from a piece of flying debris during the attack. He looked weary, mortal. The impossible perfection was chipped, making him more real. The medics said you were cleared, Xia Ling said, his voice a low rumble. But you have been quiet. He stepped inside, the door closing behind him. The voices. Are they still silent? Shen Yuan looked at him, at this man who had built a fortress of belief around him. The final eye hung between them. He could say yes, they were silent, and it would be the truth. He could leave, and Xia Ling would forever believe his tormented seer had finally found peace, perhaps transcended. But he found he couldn't do it. Not anymore. He gestured vaguely to the empty air beside him, a habit born of months of performance. They're gone. Xia Ling nodded slowly, his gaze soft. A respite, or perhaps their work is done. He took a step closer, studying Shen Yuan's face. You seem unburdened, and yet troubled by a different weight. The insight was unnerving. Shen Yuan's eyes flickered to the system prompt only he could see, hovering like a ghost in the air between them. Choose. Xia Ling followed his glance to the empty space. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, the first real, unguarded smile Shen Yuan had ever seen on him. It transformed his face, melting the ice, revealing a warmth that was devastating. Do they speak of the future now? Xia Ling asked, his tone gentle, playing along with the fantasy one last time. Or of choices? The words were a key turning in a lock. In that moment, Shen Yuan saw it all clearly. The chat, the system, the transmigration, it was all noise. A bizarre, intrusive framework. But the man in front of him, the respect they'd built in the silent, desperate hours of the attack, the unshakable, misguided, yet utterly genuine care, that was real. That was his. He looked at the system prompt. At the yes/no. He looked at Xia Ling, waiting patiently in the quiet room, his presence a solid anchor in the chaos of existence. Shen Yuan reached out, not towards the general, but towards the empty space where the chat had lived. With a deliberate, final thought, he selected no. The system prompt vanished in a wisp of silent light. Then he brought his hand up, and with the same decisive motion, he reached for the place in his mind's eye where the live chat toggle had been. He imagined a switch. He flipped it. Off. A final, faint echo, the ghost of a transmission, fluttered through his mind. Rainbow Frog 92. The feed is stabilizing. Wait, what's he doing? BL_connoisseur. He's looking at him. Not at us. At him. Dog blood lover. The choice. He's making the choice. System_message. User 007 has manually terminated the live stream. Signal lost. Aesthetic guy. He chose his world over ours. BL_connoisseur. It's perfect. Dog blood lover, wait. Did we just get canceled by the canon couple? Worth it. And then, true, absolute silence. Beautiful, profound silence. Xia Ling watched the series of emotions play across Shen Yuan's face. The conflict, the decision, the final, peaceful resolution. He saw Shen Yuan's hand fall back to his side, his shoulders relaxing as if a great weight had been lifted. Well, Xia Ling prompted softly, taking one final step forward, eliminating the space between them. What do they say? Shen Yuan looked up into those steady, gray eyes. He saw the man, not the male lead. He saw his future, not a plot line. He felt the quiet of his own mind, and the loud, beating truth of his own heart. They say nothing, Shen Yuan answered, his voice clear and sure for the first time. They are gone. There is only me. He saw the understanding dawn in Xie Ling's eyes, not of spirits departing, but of a man finally standing before him, whole and present. No filter, no fiction. Good, Xie Ling murmured, the word of benediction. And Shen Yuan, no longer an actor, no longer a seer, just a man who had chosen to stay, closed the last remaining gap himself. He leaned in and kissed General Xie Ling. It was not a kiss demanded by an audience. It was not a plot point. It was quiet and sure and real. A first kiss and a promise. Xie Ling stilled for a heartbeat. Then his arms came around Shen Yuan, pulling him close, returning the kiss with a tenderness that belied his strength. It was an answer and an acceptance. In the quiet of the room, on a frozen fortress at the edge of the stars, a story written by others had ended. Theirs, unobserved and entirely their own, had just begun.